Good afternoon and welcome. We're going to go ahead and start and just let everyone come into the room. Feel free to say hi to folks in the chat and we'll get started in just another minute. Thank you. Okay, we'll give it just another minute here and we'll 30 seconds or so and we'll get started. Okay. All right. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, and welcome. My name is Casey Murphy, and I'm ACT's Director of Programs and Events. I want to thank you for joining us today for ACT's February webinar entitled New Findings on College Transit Access and Paths to Public Funding. Before we hear from our presenters this afternoon, I wanted to quickly take care of a few housekeeping items. First, all attendees are on mute during this webinar. If you have a question or have a problem hearing us, please type it in the chat box located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and I'll do my best to get all your questions answered as the webinar gets going. Second, we will be hosting a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to type in your questions as we go. Again, the Q&A box is located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Note that when you're asking a question, please make sure you identify which one of the presenters the question is for. And finally, this session is being recorded and we'll have the recording up on the ACT website within 24 hours after the presentation ends. Now I'd like to pass things over to David Strauss, ACT's Executive Director, to give an update on what ACT currently has going on. David?
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon to all of you. As the premier association for transportation demand management, ACT's goal is to build a strong community of professionals and organizations working to advance and implement TDM at their work sites and within their communities. Webinars like today's are an important benefit to you as a member of ACT, providing you with valuable information on latest trends and important knowledge to make you more impactful in the work that you do. Over the past year, ACT has been highlighting a range of topics focused on increasing the equity of our transportation system to meet the needs and improve the lives of all people by providing efficient, affordable, and accessible transportation options. Today's webinar continues that series of equity-focused content with a look at the transit accessibility of community colleges and features research from the Selden Herring Smith Foundation, which aim to understand the impacts that accessibility, or more importantly, the lack of accessibility may have on the ability of students attending community colleges to stay in school. I personally found some of the report's findings eye-opening and felt it was an important topic to bring to the membership of ACT. I hope that you'll take back what you hear today and look for opportunities to integrate some of the ideas within your own work. To the individuals joining us that are not yet ACT members, and there are many on the call, I welcome you and invite you to become a member of the ACT community. I guarantee you that ACT membership will be a valued investment in your professional growth, including the opportunity to gather within our Higher Ed Council that focuses on shared issues, advancing future trends and technologies, advancing policies that support equitable access to all types of campus transportation and mobility programs. After today's event, you'll probably receive a note from Elizabeth Denton, our membership experience manager, offering an opportunity to connect and learn more about ACT. And I want to just take a quick moment to update on some key news and activities within the organization. Last week, ACT hosted our Impact Leadership Program in Orlando, Florida. Over 3 days, our fabulous class of impact leaders gathered for professional development and leadership training kicking off a 9-month program that will help develop participants into future leaders of the organization as well as the industry. As well, ACT's Board of Directors met last week and approved the formation of the new Technology and Innovation Council, which will focus on expanding awareness and adoption of new mobility solutions. If you're interested in participating in this new council, you can log into your membership profile on the website and select the council to be able to get information on its upcoming meetings. ACT has opened up registration for the Future of Commuting Summit. I hope all of you saw those emails. This is a new event that was held virtually last year. It's scheduled to be held in person April 26th to 27th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The unique event features a day and a half of programming and interactive sessions that put all attendees into the conversation about what the future may hold for commuters and TDM. If you have thoughts about what the future may bring, I encourage you to register and join us in Pittsburgh. In addition to the Future of Commuting Summit, planning for ACT's International Conference that's July 31st to August 4th or 3rd in Chicago is well underway. We anticipate registration to be opening up in the coming weeks with the release of our initial program with information on the 30+ breakout sessions, tours, and keynotes. As well, stay tuned for the opening of nominations for ACT's National Awards that will recognize impactful programs and organizations and leaders within the industry. Now it's on to today's webinar, New Findings on College Transit Access and Paths to Public Funding. It's my pleasure to introduce the speakers. We have Amanda Winters, who serves as the Program Director in the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices, where she serves as an advisor to state leaders on post-secondary and workforce policies. Before joining the NGA, Amanda was Assistant Director of Academic Affairs at the Illinois Board of Higher Education, where she worked on issues across the P20 spectrum. Amanda holds a bachelor degree in history from the University of Missoula-Rolla, a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and a master's degree in history from the University of Illinois Springfield. We also have Edward Smith, who is a senior program officer with the Kresge Foundation's education program. He manages a portfolio of grants designed to promote college opportunity for marginalized student groups. He earned his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, as well as an undergraduate master's degree from Penn State University. And to kick us off, we have Abigail Selden, who's the CEO of the Selden Herring Smith Foundation. Under her leadership, the foundation launched a partnership with Getty Images, create new stock photos of today's college students, and publish new data on transit inaccessibility that has generated bipartisan legislation. Abigail's experience outside philanthropy includes co-founding and selling a tech startup, studying at Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, and parenting 2 small children. Abigail, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Casey. I'm really excited to be here today with you and your fantastic membership and accompanied by Amanda and Ed, who have a tremendous amount of guidance to share today as well on this topic that we think is very critical. So we're very excited to get to share with you today. I'm just dropping into the link, into the box, 2 quick links. One, to invite folks to take a look at our transit map in case they want to see it after the presentation, as well as to follow us on Twitter, because otherwise my comms director will kill me. So, and with that, we're off to the races. Can you guys see the screen? Okay, Casey? Excellent. So at SHSF, at the Selden Herring Smith Foundation, we are broadly focused on expanding access to public services and accountability for abuse of authority. And to do that work, we really conduct ourselves in 3 ways. We make external grants, we conduct internal research, which we're going to talk about today, and then we do corporate partnerships. So corporate partnerships, as David shared, we had a partnership with Getty Images to create new stock photos of what today's college students actually look like, as opposed to perfectly curated middle-class groups of 18 to 22-year-olds on Ivy-covered campuses, actually showing the wide variety of the student experience today, including that most students are food and housing insecure and many attend community college. We also conduct internal research both on this transit topic we'll talk about today and a recent work on sex trafficking at for-profit institutions across the United States of higher education. And then, like most foundations, we also make external grants, typically grants that are quicker turnaround, I think, usually within 6 to 12 months of results, and often with a tech angle. So our most recent grant that wrapped up was to an institution that mapped data sharing agreements between ICE and private companies, and ultimately led to the ending of that practice, which was not in the spirit of the law. So today, I'm excited to talk to you about our transit project, which really started with this core question. Are community colleges transit accessible? Do you need a car to attend community college? So in 2021, we published our SHSF public transit map, which was intended to assess accessibility at community colleges across the United States. We also ended up expanding this project to be all Title IV eligible schools that are nonprofit and public, and you can see that in the link that I shared. So why did we have this question in the beginning? So in the United States today, 36% of undergraduates attend community or technical colleges. And 99% of community and technical college students live off campus. Working students, parenting students, students of color, and students from low-income backgrounds are all overrepresented at these institutions. And these students in particular must manage what we call time poverty. That we didn't coin the term, but I like it a lot. And I know that it's something that in the transit world also folks think about. But as they juggle school, family, and work commitments, the value of time is very high, and transit can have a particular impact on their success in any of these spheres. So transit infrastructure, of course, then emerges as a critical component of community college access and affordability. So we believe this is a low number, but it's provided by the College Board. Community and technical college students spend an average of almost $2,000 a year on transportation. For context, the maximum Pell Grant that a student can receive is around $6,000. And most of that usually, if not all of it, usually goes to cover tuition. So $2,000 to a community college student is quite a bit. There have been tremendous effective student support programs like CUNY ASAP or Single Stop that have provided reduced price or free Metro cards or bus passes. But unfortunately, these programs have reached a very small percentage of students so far, though they have tremendous promise. And Ed is going to share some even more promising work that Kresge has funded, I know, in the next presentation that is ready to scale. So with all of this context, that was why we built the map, which is we really wanted to answer the question of, in this landscape where transit is such an important aspect of whether students can be successful or not, do community colleges actually have transit stops? And there was no survey and there was no map prior to the publication of this in 2021. So our map currently shows the location of 1,373 public community colleges that primarily grant associate's degrees, certificates, and public, as well as public non-degree granting technical schools. We are expanding the map and will publish in the next 2 months a new version that is all of the branch and satellite campuses, as well as the primary sites we have here. Our guess is that this will not change the results materially, but we're certainly very excited to see and should know very soon. So we'll be circling back with ACT when that release happens. So how did we do this? For the more technical folks among you, you may be interested to know that we use the GPS coordinates provided by the college scorecard to generate the campus locations. And then we sourced additional data from Google Maps and the Google Places API. So we took the GPS coordinates, we used the API to identify the nearest public transit stop, and then we calculated the nearest straight line distance between the two. Now, this was a choice that we made with some deliberation, but it turns out walking directions are not readily available throughout the United States between point A and point B. And so to actually have a standard that would be consistent across all 1,373 locations, straight line distance emerges the way to do it. In addition, in places where walking directions are not commonly used, Google Maps will default to having folks walk along a five-lane highway or other things that are certainly not safe. So this seemed to be, while it may create a downward bias, a little less noisy than our alternatives. So this is literally the first look. This is what it looks like. So what did we find? So we found that a majority, 57%, of community and technical colleges have public transit within half a mile. So that's the good news. The not so good news is that 37%, the closest transit stop is more than a mile away. So, and that's again, a straight line distance. So it may in fact be materially further than that. And so a mile, especially if you're in a rush, again, if you're struggling with juggling work and kids and school, or if the weather's bad, or if you have a movement issue, or any kind of mobility related restrictions, a mile is perhaps a distance that's too far to overcome. Now, here's the interesting part, particularly since it at least was infrastructure year last year, and now with the rollout and implementation of that bill this year, it looks like it'll be infrastructure year too. For 25% of institutions, extending transit is feasible because of the proximity to existing public transportation. So for this 25% of community and technical colleges, there's a transit stop within 5 miles. It's just too far to walk to right now. So perhaps unsurprisingly, given that we opted to do this project and are here today, we do believe that expanding transit access to community and technical colleges is a timely infrastructure investment opportunity. Something that's particularly interesting, I think, perhaps to ACT especially, is that this is an opportunity that is available nationwide. The schools that we think of as the opportunity schools, where transit is between half a mile and 4.5 miles away from the institution, these options are everywhere. They're in the Mid-Atlantic, they're in the Great Lakes region, they're in the Rocky Mountains region, they're in the Southwest, they're everywhere, they're in the plains. And so we can drill down, and our website has some additional case studies, as does the published paper. But this was a slide that, well, perhaps not the most dynamic of the ones we can offer to look at, really brings home that this is a national problem, but also a national opportunity. So as we think about this opportunity, we think about it in terms of stops, subsidies, and schedules. So while our project is only able to measure whether there's a stop or not, or if so, how far away, for students, whether they can afford to actually use that stop is a critical issue. And whether the schedules match the actual times that they need to go to campus is an additional criterion for success. And so that's something I know that Ed will speak more to, and was more in what Kresge covered. But I think it's important to highlight that we really can't have successful transit access without all 3 of these needs being met. And so it's been very exciting for us to see that actually these recommendations and others from our paper were actually adopted into the new Bipartisan Path to College Act, which was introduced in November and continues to attract some interest on the Hill. So I'm going to paste a link to an Inside Higher Ed article into the chat, so folks can read more about the bill. As a foundation, we cannot take a position on legislation, but it certainly has been flattering to see our findings cited so aggressively in this bill, and to see public action taken on it so quickly after publication. So our foundation has published the map, the data, the code, all under a Creative Commons license. So we are ecstatic to share it with anyone to whom it might be useful. All of the photos were produced as part of our partnership with Getty Images, and also are available. And really welcome the opportunity to chat with folks and share more about this work, and of course to share the expanded map with all of the satellite and other locations very soon. And with that, I will pass over to Ed Smith from the Kresge Foundation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Abigail. I'll go ahead and share my screen so I could get my presentation loaded. Can everyone see a slide deck? Great, great. Okay, let's do this. Abigail, once again, thanks for your leadership and insight on this issue and everything this Selden Herring Smith Foundation has produced over the last year, and some to shed light on this issue we care about a lot. And I look forward to talking more about you with here. Thank you, Casey, for coordinating such an important panel with ACT, and for providing wonderful thought points and a discussion platform for us to move this work along. As Casey mentioned, my name is Edward Smith, and I represent the Kresge Foundation as a senior program officer on the education program. Kresge sits upon the ancestral homelands of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Potawatomi, the Odawa, and Ojibwe, and other tribal nations. I'd like to recognize their significance for not only the indigenous people who call it home, past, present, and future, but also for developing the initial cities and transportation pathways that we now use to navigate the state. I think it's important to state that for a number of reasons, so thank you for allowing me to do so. I'm going to talk a little bit about Kresge's college transit partnerships, as you can see here, an initiative of projects supporting partnerships that are tearing down barriers to college student success in their respective cities and regions, and thereby giving us some insights on how to make transportation in cities hopefully more equitable for all. I'll feature maybe two partnerships led by DVP Praxis and Rio Hondo, and a collective of colleges in New Orleans, respectively, that I think provides a flavor for the work we try to undertake, as well as some insights we hope to see attained not only regionally, but nationally. So let me first spend a few minutes talking about Kresge and provide a little bit of context before I feature the projects. As I mentioned, the Kresge Foundation is where I work. We're a private foundation that seeks to expand opportunity in America's cities, spending nearly $160 million annually in 8 programming and practice areas. Education is one such program. Generally speaking, we're a community development, city-centric foundation. We do fund nationally in education, with focus states including Texas, Florida, Michigan, and California. Some of this work I'll describe it occurs in some of those states. Our education program is focused on boosting higher education attainment, particularly among marginalized groups, as my bio states. We not only seek to do this by strengthening pathways into higher education from students in K-12 context, but for those working and for those maybe disconnected from work or a school altogether, looking for a pathway in. We do that by trying to reinforce the capacity of our nation's colleges and universities to do this work well. And finally, we have an ecosystem strategy, which I'll focus a bit more on today, and in which this work kind of sits. It's a strategy that we hope helps students navigate their cities and campuses and the touch points in their lives, childcare, work, social services, and other areas in ways that provide better facilitation back and forth from the city to campus and back. We think that a well-functioning higher education system would have extraordinary coordination among these touch points, and that this coordination is necessary to student success, not just a nice to do. And if you look at the image here, you'll see a critical piece of this ecosystem is transportation. Now, we've funded research in areas and advocacy in other areas of that ecosystem, but to be honest, we were really unclear how we'd approach transportation. I think you know, some of us, and myself included, have experience in higher education. I could talk a little bit more about how I've come to this question, but there was certainly just kind of descriptive data or anecdotal data or just insights that indicated that transit might be a challenge, but we were unclear how large the scale might be or what a possible investment might do insofar as leading to our greater goals of increasing college access and success and our discrete measures of persistence and attainment. So we funded a cluster of grants to support these partnerships and to understand how these barriers could be dismantled and what type of insights they'd yield. Hopefully to the rest of the foundation and the rest of us focused on building inclusive communities and endeavoring transit reform. I think in large part, we were informed by many of the data points and hypotheses that Abigail laid out, which is why I cite her here in the slide. I think, you know, we were certainly driven by the College Board's data points. I think, you know, that figure Abigail quoted is, if to my knowledge, between 18 and 20% of a student's cost of attendance, and that's, you know, inclusive cost of attendance, inclusive of tuition fees, but living and others. So we thought just that was beyond trivial, but actually a material kind of expense that we wanted to address as well. And Abigail's comments about accessibility and agency, I think, hold true for us, and we're guided, guided our actions here. And I will just say, you know, as a former community college instructor, I've been in courses where students, you know, 3/4 of the class is late because of a problem with the train line or because of challenges they've experienced getting from the train line to the station. I think otherwise, I've had to drop students off because train lines were down or the bus never came, or, you know, students dealing with unsafe conditions waiting for buses or trains. So I think this issue really spoke to me as well. So I'll just generalize here. We wanted to explore the role of colleges in ameliorating some of these conditions and serving as a critical facilitator of partnerships that would enable mobility for students going back and forth. We also wanted to situate some of this work in broader movements for transit reform that I know many of you think about and are leading yourselves. So those were just some of the main motivators for this work. And I'll just loosely go through the timeline here. We had a landscape analysis and some data gathering procured by DVP Praxis, a consulting firm in higher education, doing some great work. They publish some of the reports, or rather provide some of the reports in the chat momentarily, that motivated our thinking and guided how we unfolded this cluster. But as you could see here, you know, we went through an RFP process, awarded grants. Projects as of 2020 were underway, both, you know, planning, implementation, and evaluation grants. As all of us know, COVID implications and disrupted, you know, uprooted our world and uprooted some of this work, but we still have some interesting findings to share and a lot of great insights to discuss. Again, here's a snapshot. We did 5 grants with a cumulative spend of 1.4 million. Planning, implementation, and evaluation grants. College campuses as leads with transit authorities as partners, and business and other sectors as appropriate. Again, catalyzing systems change. Here's just an overview of our partners here. As you can see, Dillard University led a partnership in New Orleans. We had St. Peter's College leading partnerships in Florida Atlantic University, a partnership between Temple University and DVP Praxis to do a national demonstration project with the LA Community College District, as well as CUNY in New York. And then finally, Rio Hondo College doing some planning work as well as participating in the evaluation. So I'll quickly run through some project insights. As you could see here, I projected the goals and activities of the Rio Hondo work. Now, this was to explore the characteristics of students who received the UPass, which is a transit benefit that many colleges offer, but certainly we wanted to understand not only the characteristics of students who use it, but the impact it had on measures of success, measures like degree completion at the far end, but intermediary outcomes like credit accumulation, persistence, and others. And just providing a snapshot of the sample treatment, and then again, some of the controls, retention, credit accumulation, and then degree completion. And I could provide some of the estimates and some graphs as appropriate if needed toward the end. But what we found that here was that students were more likely to persist semester to semester, completed credits at higher rates, significantly more likely to earn a greater number of credits at each semester observed. And then we're significantly more likely to have earned a credential during the study period. Now, I will say this is one discrete aspect of the evaluation work, but these trends hold, at least at the outset, of this work in a larger sample collected or evaluated rather with the LA County Community College. The New York work was postponed a bit more, but I'd say that this provides some suggestive evidence of the return on investment, and nothing we've seen contradicts this. Nothing we've seen from LA. I think this is really suggestive, really strong, really positive, and very motivating. I would say the New Orleans work was more planning based and doing more investigatory work on students' experiences with existing transit options, as well as how that investigation can inform regional efforts to reform public transit and multimodal transportation. So as you can see here, I've listed just a slate of activities that included convening regional transportation authorities, regional planning commissions, Ride New Orleans, private transportation options as well. Published reports, which kind of highlighted data gathering activities from focus groups to student surveys, an analysis very similar, although not as sophisticated to the one Abigail just spoke of. And then, try to come to grips with faculty and staff and administrators about what can be done. I think overall, the main takeaway here is just a clear need to improve regional coordination and communication to students. They had been spending money on transit supports, but marketing tactics to make those supports land with students were ill-effective, and I think could there's a campaigning that needs to occur with some of this, and then uncovering our planning issues, unaffordable housing insecurity, people who are unhoused. I think all of that are trends and issues, again, greater than the scope of this work, but through this work, understood that these were certainly issues that they had not taken stock of, but were certainly kind of disruptors in kind of the whole student success game they were playing. So as a result, what have we learned, right? We've collected a bit more evidence on the positive relationship between transit subsidies and student success. Transportation remains a problem for students and staff, particularly at community colleges. And then we have some interest convergence, right? Colleges, we found wanted smoother transitions between school and life. Transit authorities wanted ridership, and then both wanted to provide high quality experiences for their constituents. Both partners experience severe pandemic disruptions that we all know full well. But both partners want to be involved in infrastructure investment opportunities. And I think that's where we'll continue to head. Just thinking about ways in which to curate resources coming from feds and states to facilitate some of this transportation work. With that, I'll stop now and turn it back over to you, Casey. But thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, okay. And we're going to go ahead and pass it over now to Amanda Winters. Amanda, take it away.
Hey, everybody. So excited to be with you to talk a little bit about the perspective of the National Governors Association when it comes to some of this work and some of the emerging opportunities for funding for states and localities to get some of this work done. So I'll just say just a few words about what National Governors Association does. So we are actually two different entities smushed together. So we have the association side, and then we have our Center for Best Practices, which is where I am located. So we are a bipartisan consultative and technical assistance service for governors' offices to help them explore the development of great policies to support their residents across a bunch of different areas. I work the intersection of post-secondary education and workforce and human services as we're thinking about pathways to economic mobility and opportunity. So, we're approaching this issue around public transit access really in a cross-agency, across systems way. One of the things that's been framing up our work in this space really is social determinants of health. So you'll find, and you guys play a really key role in thinking about advancing the social determinants of health for populations, because most of these things say access to health care providers, access to education opportunities, access to work opportunities, access to childcare. These things are all facilitated through strong public transit systems. And so that's really how we're approaching this. This is a holistic view around getting residents access to some of these key connection points, whether they be education, then work opportunities, childcare, these places where people can come together and move their families forward through the connection to education and job pathways. So I'm going to share a couple different insights with you all today around some of the opportunities within the American Rescue Plan, which are dollars that are currently out and available to states and localities, and then also the brand new Infrastructure and Jobs Act that went through, where monies will be rolling out in some different phases, and those are just starting to come together, and those notice of funding opportunities are just starting to emerge. So I'm going to share a couple links with you. I know I don't have PowerPoints, and the reason I didn't is because much of what I wanted to share was like stuff you could click on and take away, and I know it's super annoying to see a PowerPoint up there and not be able to click on the link that maybe I've hyperlinked in my PowerPoint. So I'm going to throw a couple things into the chat right now. So first I will throw in something which is very long. I don't expect everybody to read it. So let's see. Let me put this to everyone. So this is the handbook, if I can get it here. And okay, so it doesn't like me to do that way. That's all right. So this is what I'm going to paste in just a second, is the handbook that the White House provided to states about how to navigate the new Infrastructure Act. So I don't expect you to read the whole thing. It's over there. That's better. That's something you can click on. I don't expect you to read the whole thing. It's 400 and some pages long. There will not be a quiz, but it's great to go through there and do some word searches for some of these public transit grant opportunities. I'll be providing something that will help you distill it a little bit easier as well, but wanted you to have that foundational document so you can do searches of your own, because it might be that you have some regional specific opportunities. For instance, Appalachia has some grant opportunities within the infrastructure bill that you might be able to access if that's within your service area. So the new infrastructure bill is really looking to increase opportunities for rural areas, which I know could be a huge impact in a huge way through some of the expansion of public transit opportunities. So there are formula grants for rural areas within the infrastructure bill, which the goals are explicitly to enhance access to healthcare, education, and employment. So there's really some clear grant opportunities to be able to access to do this type of work. Also, there are capital investment grants. There's money for statewide transportation planning that could be critical for bringing some of these stakeholders to the table and having the space to do the planning. I will point to some things that Ed mentioned as a part of his presentation, which is the partnership is important here. It's not, the onus isn't just on the transit professionals to come up with the solution. The education partners need to think about scheduling that can coincide with transit schedules, their course scheduling, the way they're offering services and supports to students, the times of day they're being offered, the way in which you will transit and education professionals can work together with the student, the learner in mind, rather than the schedules dictating what a student or learner is able to access at the higher education institution. There's also a couple grant opportunities within the infrastructure bill to advance transportation equity. And I think that can certainly be a place where you could plant your flag for a project like this. And there's a notice of funding opportunity has just gone out around RAISE grants. They call it RAISE. It's Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. So that's a grant opportunity that's just come out through the Department of Transportation in conjunction with the infrastructure bill, which is focused on state and local governments and metropolitan planning organizations with an eye towards increasing the equity of transportation access. So then I wanted to throw in a couple of these links related to ARPA funding. So I mentioned the American Rescue Plan, which was passed in 2021, which has some monies available to do this type of work. They have developed a pretty decent cheat sheet at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Hopefully you've seen it, but if not, I'm going to share it here. So this goes through a lot of the programs that are available through ARPA to support public transportation. So wanted to, and that will have some links in it to talk about some of these different types of programs that are available, whether they be formula programs or competitive or capital investment grants. And then also wanted to share, there is a really great resource that came out very recently, along with the handbook from the federal government, which is on the, let's see if I got in there. Yes, it's from a group called the Atlas, which if you've ever followed Route 50 or some of these other sort of news groups or aggregators and research groups, Atlas is related to them. So they've created an entirely open handbook for state and local governments on the new Infrastructure Act. And it breaks out the grant programs in a really useful way. So I would say definitely take a look at that. It will let you dive into the specific programs, look at who the eligible providers would be, and the timeline and structure for these funding opportunities. And I think what the National Governors Association is trying to do is we are pushing out these resources to states. We're trying to say this is a moment, an opportunity to take this funding that's coming into states either from ARPA or from the new infrastructure bill and take a moment to strategize together about what we're trying to do with them. And for, especially for public transportation, what goals are we trying to reach? We have statewide goals, certainly, but a lot of these goals exist at the regional level. So we're encouraging state governments to connect with their regional leads and their regional leaders around transportation planning, to think about where this money should go to create opportunities within disconnected communities, within those who need access, better access to education and workforce opportunities. Certainly workforce development is a huge priority right now for governors, and without getting people access to the training opportunities, we have that disconnect and that gap there. And public transportation plays a key role in bridging that gap to allow for economic mobility pathways for these disconnected workers and reskilling of workers. So, and then also we're at the same time, we're thinking about educational access, we're thinking about healthcare access. So, I mean, it's really multi-pronged. When you're having the regional conversations, it's not just about who might need to get to colleges, even though that's, of course, our topic for today and key, I think, in thinking about connecting to state level priorities. But it's also those other social determinants of health issues, access to, and that's where you guys fit in, is access to these critical spaces for community health and community advancement. And this sits squarely in the middle of that. Community colleges especially are hubs of workforce dollar access for basic needs connections, for childcare connections, for food security for some. So we're really thinking about how to get the most bang for your buck when thinking about adjusting strategies, usually using these new federal dollars. And a lot of things exist here for you to dive into. And all of them require multiple voices at the table, bringing in their critical areas of focus and where they can better connect and strategize to advance these overall regional priorities. So I'll pause there. I hope I didn't go over. Casey, I want to throw it back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you all. It was some really great information. This is kind of an interesting and niche topic for our group, and we're really excited to have everyone on today, and a wonderful presentation from all three of you. I'm going to real quickly, as we get into the Q&A here, launch a quick poll. Just want to get everyone's take on today's webinar real quickly. Not going to share the results, but we welcome all feedback and really are trying hard to increase our webinar awareness and making sure that we're on track with what you all are looking for. That said, I am going to open it up here for Q&A, and I have a couple questions here. And this first one I'm going to put to all three of you and ask, did you find in your research that community colleges have internal structures, transportation departments, for example, in place to assist students and staff with their transportation decisions? I will maybe throw it to Abigail first to answer that one.
Ed will have probably more in-depth knowledge about this than I will. I can say that when we looked around and when we asked around, we did find that this was something community colleges were taking seriously. There weren't always close relationships, though, with local transit authorities. And so that was one of the reasons actually why we were so excited when ACT reached out, is that we really see that folks like you guys can help be the bridge here. But Ed, what did you see?
Sure. I would just note that we received about 68 applications from post-secondary education institutions. The overwhelming majority of them were from community colleges as leads. Just in speaking with many of colleagues in my network, and our initial review of the applicants indicated that this was indeed something they were taking very seriously, and had either initial focus groups or descriptive data at their disposal to highlight the problem, but may not have had the analytic capacity or a unit charged to broker the type of relationships and partnerships needed to do the type of work that our grant helped support. So, I mean, yeah, very important, but it would be a stretch to say many community colleges had people in charge or units in charge to do this work.
Okay. Amanda, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just note that it's not necessarily an organic, natural relationship that exists unless you intentionally build it. So there's not a lot of tables where you're going to have transportation and higher ed there together. There should be more tables where they're at together, but I think you're going to have to intentionally set those.
Excellent. Thank you. This next one I'm going to direct to you, Ed. Ed, this person noticed from Kresge mentioned the need for better coordination. Has there been an effort to reach out to mobility managers? She mentions in Ohio, we have nearly 40 mobility managers, especially in the small urban and rural centers, whose jobs are to coordinate all aspects of transportation and has those connections already. It could be a good idea to find if states have mobility managers, as we have to put together a coordinated plan to close the gaps on unmet transportation needs.
Sure. No, I appreciate that question. I would say that just on the theme of coordination and maybe scheduling, I think Amanda and Abigail spoke to this quite eloquently. We found the same thing, that was certainly one of the more challenging elements, right? Coordinating classes with transportation schedules, whether that was a bus or train or otherwise. And I think what we found was the colleges most often try to the extent possible, modify start and end times, sometimes in isolation or without, pun intended, coordination with the transit authority or someone in charge, a mobility manager or otherwise, to maybe make some modifications or, survey what could be done on the authority side. So what we found, I think, in the planning grants, at least, where convenings were a large part of their work, that they were able to get through to that the person in charge with some of that coordinating on the authority side. But for lack of a more sophisticated way of saying it, in the absence of that, they try to just take it upon themselves, the college partners, and make those changes without that partnership in mind.
Okay. Did you have something else to add, or is that?
No, I do know that there might be folks who were involved in the cluster on the on the webinar who might be able to throw something in the chat or add a take that might clarify anything or advance anything I said further.
Okay. Yeah,
Right.
feel free if there is anyone on the call who would like to just to add to that, feel free to do so in the chat. And again, if you do have any other questions or want to make any other comments, feel free to do so in the Q&A tab or in the chat box if need be. This next question, local governments often have the power to improve operational funding for transit agencies. Have local governments been active and shown interest in coordinating? Who would like to take that one first? Maybe Abigail or Amanda, sorry. Maybe Amanda, you want to start off?
Amanda.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure.
I stopped myself. I was like, wait, I knew it's Amanda.
No, I there definitely has been interest in coordinating, and I do think with the levers of the money that we have now that's available to facilitate that coordination, it can be accelerated because it's usually region to region when you have sort of a stronger forward-looking leader in that area. That's when you see some movement. It hasn't been totally organic though at the state level either. No dig on local governments. We're all behind the 8 ball here, but yeah, I think there's interest. And I think if they're hearing about it from more than one place, which is why we're excited to disseminate the work of the Selden Herring Smith Foundation and to learn from the work that Kresge is doing, so we can start telling governor's offices about this, so they start hearing about it from more than one place, and this becomes more of a priority. So I think with a little bit of a push, we can see some really good work happen.
Awesome. Anything else to add, Ed or Abigail? Okay. All right, this next question. For many, if not most schools, a lack of financial resources restricts expanding transportation options as most are funded via student fees. Have you seen examples of creative funding to support college transportation funding without financial burdening students more? Ed or Abigail, do you want to start with that?
I think that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So the state of Connecticut has actually implemented bulk purchasing where fees are not supposed to be passed on to the students, I believe was in the last draft of the legislation, for all public and nonprofit institutions in the state. And so they were supposed to get advantage of, the schools were supposed to be able to buy bulk purchases of transit passes and then provide those to the students without passing on the fee. But obviously somebody has to pay for it somewhere, which is one of the reasons why I think Amanda has been such a critical resource, I think, for all of us as we try to understand all the different money that is out there. I can say that my big hope, and the flip side is that the fear, is that this is a moment where there is a lot of money sloshing around, but most of it is not tagged to higher education. Most of it is tagged to everything else. And so it's a great moment for something that could be a joint priority like this one, which has so many good civic implications to come out of these other pots, but only with awareness is that going to happen.
Yeah, and I will throw in that we do see some states utilizing things like WIOA funds. For example, North Carolina uses their WIOA funds for their Finish Line grant program that provides up to $1,000 for students who have finished at least half of their degree, just to help them with things like transportation, housing, and financial barriers. So really, we see a lot of the funding coming at the student or the learner to help offset their costs. And that's one of the, I guess, barriers, opportunities, I don't know how to frame it, for institutions, because a lot of funding in the higher ed and workforce space goes to the student and not necessarily to support the system in innovating. And I think that's why this moment of having the federal funds that can flow through for planning and for capital grants and for assessment of systems, it's critical for us to take this moment to think about some of these holistic challenges, because money doesn't necessarily always flow for those sorts of uses. Rather, it flows as a subsidy to a learner or worker to be able to help them pay for these services.
The only thing I'll add is that in addition to maybe the anecdote from Connecticut, I'd say I've heard other states and other locales repurposing student fees. So if not charging a new fee, but repurposing student fees and directing them to maybe basic needs supports, or in some cases to address a transit issue. I will say that outside of this initiative, the transit initiative, we've had partners using their CARES Act funding to support basic needs, a part of which they've been funding transit in many different domains. And I think what's new here for us is that now we have some evidence on the possible return on investment, right? I think at least when I went into this, we started speculating and in the abstract thinking that transit might have been a challenge, but not knowing what we could anticipate if we invested in ways that reduced transit barriers. And now I think we're, with Abigail's work and certainly with some of the work of our grantees, we're shedding light on what a bit more on what we can expect if we do invest fees and otherwise into this work.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question had just come in about to all three of you. The Chronicle of Higher Ed recently highlighted some of these issues and pointed out that transportation is a basic need in a recent post, which they throw the link in there. What strategies would you suggest to elevate this discussion with college or university leadership who may not have the same perspective or understanding? And this person says particularly related to funding those needs. Ed, do you want to take that one to start?
Yeah, I think I'll just say quickly, and I'll welcome other perspectives. Part of this, I take it as responsibility for philanthropy to step up and facilitate these conversations on platforms that draw intense attention from decision makers and policymakers, right? So while I'm searching for that answer, I think I'm assuming the responsibility as a grant maker and as philanthropy to make sure these conversations take place and to make sure the stakeholders are in the house to kind of use actionable data to make decisions on students' behalf.
Excellent.
Yeah, I want to echo what Ed is saying, which is that is part of why we conceived of our role in this project, which is we know that funders can signal that this is important and hopefully empower faculty and staff to raise it up, to note that there may be money for this. And I think that, as Amanda has noted, there's actually now going to be a lot of money for this. And so hopefully that that availability of funds in an environment where HEA is not going to get reauthorized anytime soon will be hopefully enable folks like you to make the case internally. I can say also that, we are hoping, and what we are doing is that there will be a big press push around our expanded release this spring with the more granular data, and some of that will be at the state level. So if the anonymous person who posted the question wants to reach out to us, happy to connect and see if your state is on our list for the press push. I do anticipate also that other national foundations are going to step in. I know that I've heard from some. I expect that Ed has heard from some as well, who are now interested in this issue. And so there will be more private money coming for this as well.
And I will just say, just to piggyback on Ed and Abigail, a lot of institutions want more students at their doorsteps. So you're going to have a lot of community college leaders. You're going to have a lot of regional colleges and universities say, yes, if this is something that's going to help people get better access to my institution, I want to be at that table. I want to be a part of it. And you're going to have those places that are not as open in enrollment, more valuing exclusivity, that aren't going to be as anxious to be at the table. And you know what? Hopefully peer pressure could do something to them. Or frankly, why I like to work with at the National Governors Association is sometimes if you can convince the executive level folks to say this is a priority, then that is a way to get some stuff done. So frankly, I think it can be messaging from both sides. It can be from, look, this is an access and enrollment, a completion strategy for your institution, but also this is going to be a state priority. So if we can get some states stepping out in front and recognizing this public transportation access for their communities as a priority, especially with the new infrastructure bill. I think we can see a lot of movement maybe from those leaders who might not be inclined to immediately agree.
Awesome. Well, we have just reached the top of the hour, and that went by extremely fast. And I want to thank all three panelists today for a job well done. I can't wait to see what the future research shows and where all that money is going to end up. I hope it's in the great hands and we get some transit out to some of these community colleges. I want to thank again all three panelists for joining us today. I want to thank all of you for being on the call and let you know that our next webinar will be Thursday, March 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and it'll be on making parking cash out a reality. So registration will open next week, and we look forward to having you join us. Again, thank you all for being here this afternoon, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Everyone, this is great.